Good evening, everyone. We're doing something a little bit different this week. When I first started the channel, I created a playlist that was called Cartomancer's Corner. And in that, what I'd intended to do was put deck reviews of independent decks that I used a lot, and at that point there were a lot of them, to try and give the artists a little bit of exposure. It was my way of sort of giving back to the artists because it's a collaborative process, tarot reading, oracle deck reading, with the deck itself. And somewhere along the line, I got distracted and I forgot that that was a thing that I did. But there's an opportunity to rebirth that here now today because I'm very pleased to introduce to you all my friend Marion. You may remember her. She is a tarot consultant. She's been reading tarot since the mid-90s and I am blessed to call her my friend. And she currently is or has just launched on Kickstarter her new deck, which is the Grief Journey Oracle. And this thing is so exquisite. I wanted to not only share it with you, but also give Marion a chance to talk to you about it, because I think it's one of the most important decks, actually, that has entered the space in what is a very saturated space in a long time. Marion, hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. So we are technically challenged between the pair of us. I think we're doing quite well with what we've got, but unfortunately, I'm not able to use the overhead camera with this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Marion a few questions, get some information for you all about it, and while Marion's talking, I'm going to hold up the cards for you so you can see just how extraordinary this deck is. So, Marion, if we can hand over to you, when did you get the idea to create this oracle deck focused on grief? When did it first occur to you?
Um, so with my particular journey, it was really I always kind of knew in the back of my mind that I would do something. Did I ever envisage this? No. But the gods conspired, fate conspired, and it came about. And what happened was it was during 2020. My dad passed away, and it was really like I was looking for a deck that was not tarot because tarot felt too much like work. Because, like yourself, I'm a full time reader, so it felt like at this time where my world had been turned upside down, I did not want to feel like I was at my work. But at the same time, I naturally gravitated towards cartomancy for assistance, for help to process things like we all do, or those of us in this sphere. And I couldn't find anything. I'm not saying that there isn't decks out there that encountered grief, in the process of loss, etc. But it was very twee. It was very kind of a love and light, and yeah, that's fine. And then there was ancestral decks as well, which are lovely, and to create and to have that relationship with people who you didn't actually know in life. But
Yeah.
there was nothing that really focused on you're going through something, and it's possibly the worst thing as a human being you will ever experience. And there just felt like nothing there to help. And at that time, like, the normal practices that we had, like gathering together with family and friends, that was not an option. We were
Such
incredibly
a difficult
isolated.
time. Yeah.
Exactly, it was like we weren't even like able to be with our loved ones that we were losing at the time. So many people passed alone, and so it was all those things. And then it was maybe about, when was it? So something kept, niggling at me. You should really do something. You should do something. And then I hit upon the idea of an oracle deck specifically looking at grief and loss, and not just grief and loss when a person dies, because, you know, there's so many other kinds of loss, there's so many other things that we grieve for in our lives. And it really just kind of came to me, and I'm like, right, that's what I'm going to do. That's the idea. And then it was a bit like, oh, now what? Oh, I can't draw. You know, I'm not an artist. I do words. I do talking.
Mm-hmm.
I do not do pictures or artwork. But you need the
So
tool.
for sure. So from that initial inspiration, as you saw that there wasn't anything around that was really catering for what you were looking for at that
Mhm.
time, to the active creation of it, right? Presumably, it was from there that you, well, talk to us a little bit about the collaboration with Terry, because it's Terry who's the artist on this
Yes.
deck. Like, how did that come about? Um,
Um, so basically, how that came about was naturally with me. There is a very comical story, of course. Um,
of course.
you know, of course there is.
Always.
I was standing in my kitchen one day, and it was a grey, murky, horrible kind of February. I think it was maybe about February, you know, but it was that kind of murky grey time of year, and
Mm.
it was very much standing making a cup of tea to keep myself warm, essentially. And my wee voice, as I call it, my intuition kept saying, you know, you need to get this deck done. You need to get this deck. Because, I mean, you don't want somebody else to do it. How would you feel if somebody else did it? And blah, blah. And it just kept nagging at me. Whether it was the muses, whether it was my intuition, whether it was my dad, you know, niggling at me. And eventually I remember just kind of throwing down the teaspoon on the work surface, and I was like, fine then. If I have to do this, find me an artist. And I mean, I was not right. You know, that was literally what I said to the ether, to the universe, whatever. And I just carried on making my tea and walked away. And then I was sitting scrolling through social media, as you do. And a good friend of mine, Sarah, had shared new content to her Instagram stories. So I clicked on it because she's always got good things, and she sells tarot decks. I'm like, oh, I wonder what she's got. And she had shared a beautiful picture of a wooden painted crescent moon, and it was like a cloudscape. And I was like, oh my god, where did she get this? How much is it? And where can I get one? That was my thoughts. So I clicked, so she had tagged obviously the artist. So I clicked on it and I landed up in Terry's Instagram page. And it was literally like, you know, that thunderbolt moment. Now, if you meet somebody, you're kind of, it's as if you're hit by lightning. It's like it kind of takes your breath
Hmm.
away. And that was literally how I felt when I seen Terry's art. And it was like, I've found my artist. And I just knew, you know, that this was the person that I had to create this deck with. But then the problem came, like Terry was not an artist of oracle decks or cartomancy, or, you know, she was not in this world. And I'm like, how
Hmm.
do I go about like approaching this girl? You know, it's like saying hi. So I bought one of her products. You know, I bought one of her moons, and this was the moon that I
That's
bought.
beautiful.
And it was on her website, and it was the last one she'd had in the batch, because she only does like small one-off pieces. And I got this, and I got it delivered, and it was incredible. And I shared it to my stories on Instagram. Look at this incredible piece I got. Go and check out this artist. And I was kind of hoping that that would maybe open the door to communication. And lo and
Hmm.
behold, Terry messaged me and says, oh, thanks so much for sharing. And I'm like, I've got a road in. Here we
While
go.
you're here.
By the way. So I mean, I really did. I mean, it was just that kind of a. Like, I know this might sound a bit odd, but I have get this proposition, and
Hmm.
it was really like alchemy because it transpired that one of Terry's ambitions was to create an oracle deck, and
So you were
well,
sent to her as much as she was sent to you. Yeah.
so it was like I couldn't draw or paint, but I could do the words and the concept,
Hmm.
and Terry could
Hmm.
obviously create the artwork. And she's a Gemini, so so we arranged to have a Zoom call, after the back and forth and that. And by that point, it was April 2023, and it was the 20th of
Hmm.
April. And the reason I know the exact date was because that was the same date that I inadvertently and accidentally gave up smoking.
I recall that
You
day.
recall? Yes. There was a really strong new moon in Aries. It was the second one in Aries.
Hmm.
And then it was literally just in the 29th degree, and then the sun went into Taurus. It was a really, and then it was like part of the nodes were in Taurus and Scorpio as well. They were just transitioning. It was a
Hmm.
really, really, intense astrological time.
Intense. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Um,
Hmm.
and that was it. We had this 4.5 hour Zoom call, which we'd never met each other before, and it just there was just this instant connection between us. And by the end of that, it was as if we'd known each other all our lives. And
That's
Terry was
amazing.
absolutely on board with it, and the two of us were like, "We'll do this," because I mean, there's so many like projects that begin but never get finished, for one reason
Mm.
or another. But I think the subject matter, we both just really resonated with it,
Hmm.
and it was something that, and Terry said, she was like, I'm just so happy because like this project has challenged her as an artist, to actually create like some of the imagery with regard because of the stories and because of the subject matter of them. It's and the marvelous thing, the unbelievable thing about it is the vast majority of these paintings Terry created while she was pregnant with her first baby. So all that added emotion and changes and and I mean I really did ask a lot of her, and she completely and utterly met the brief and then some. She really did. She's incredible.
Did you find it challenged you as a reader, looking at it from a different perspective? Instead of reader, now creator, was there a different kind of process um, involved in kind of thinking through, or was it a natural extension of what you already do?
I think it was a bit of both, because once
Mm.
we had decided, right, we're going to do this, the
Hmm.
natural next step is, well, how are we going to do
For sure.
this? How on earth, where do you even start with a topic like that? Because the great thing about creating a tarot deck is you've already got a structure.
The structure's there, yeah, for
You,
sure.
you know you've already got that in place.
Mm.
But when it comes to an oracle, there's obviously some oracles out there that have got like structure and a system is created, but
Hmm.
I always had this idea in my head that it was to free flow as much as possible in order for it
Yeah.
to be as welcoming and as appealing as possible for as many people as possible, because it's such a universal, it's a universal process.
Absolutely. And it's a difficult one to be prescriptive about, I
Yes.
think. People's grief journey is a process, and whilst there may be certain aspects that thematically are the same for people, the experience of losing a husband is very different to losing a child, to losing a parent, or to, to expand it, losing your job, or, any one of the other types of loss or bereavement that can be experienced by people. That's, I just love these cards so much. I keep getting distracted actually looking at them on the screen here. Did you find that the creation of these cards reflected your own grief journey, or did it become much more expansive than that as the creation of the deck unfolded?
Probably both. Because there are some cards in the deck that came about because of deeply personal experiences, in my life. I mean, if you want, I'll share some if you want, you know.
If,
So
if you're comfortable to do so.
I've also got like a copy of the deck here, and the card, the one of the most special ones is Guardian, and that came about because a number of years ago I was with a friend who had very sadly lost a child, and it was our daughter's anniversary, and she asked me to go to the graveyard with her on the anniversary, and I was like, yeah, just for emotional support. I was like, of course. So we went to the graveyard, and I kind of left her, have her private time. And as we were leaving, it was like a wee kind of separate area of the cemetery graveyard, and it was like a wee kind of copse almost. It was like kind of like it was surrounded by hedge, and
Yeah.
I felt this energy, and it was the energy of a child. Wasn't my friend's child, it was just the energy of a child, and it was almost like I was kind of guided to this kind of a bit of unkept grass, and I just kind of went with it, and it was like before I knew where I was on my knees on the ground, and I was like clearing this overgrown grass, and underneath there, what there was like a plaque on the ground, like a metal, like a grave marker, essentially, and it was an unnamed child who had been, who was an orphan, and they didn't know his name, so it was an unmarked grave, but it was a wee boy. Because I could tell it because of his energy. In fact, I can feel him. I always feel him whenever I say this. And what you said, and I looked at the dates, and it was like kind of Victorian times. And where we were, it was like an old like coal mining community. There's a lot of the communities like up where I live are. And I felt his energy, and he was just, and what he said to me was, I look after the children when their mum and dads aren't here. And I was like, alright, okay. And I just felt this child, and he said to me, and I was like, how, and I don't know why I just said, I was like, how can I help you? And he was like, please remember me. And that's basically my.
There he is. That's beautiful.
I'm
That's
sorry.
really beautiful.
I keep
No, it's right.
I keep forgetting saying I need to give people a trigger warning when I'm talking about these cards.
No, it's cool. Interestingly enough, although you've never shared that story with me before,
Have
I
I?
actually have a very, very similar one from a graveyard in Boscastle, of all places, when I was on holiday down there. Similar sort of, all sorts of crazy things. Um, but yeah, shared experience, very, very similar.
So that's the story behind that one.
So, I'll just keep putting these cards up here. The process of grief is, well, so the process of grief is kind of universal. The sense of loss is universal, but actually the process of grief and death and loss and all of these things can actually vary widely culturally. What did you do to try and help the way that this deck resonates right across the board? Because you said it was very important for you not to be prescriptive, and it was very important for you to not try and funnel people down a particular way of experiencing their grief. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think, people probably see that in a lot of the cards, there's a lot of animals. Whilst I don't consider it an animal deck,
Mm.
there is a lot of animals in it. And again, that was a very deliberate thing. And even like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the animals and identify them, there is a animal, a bird, a fish, a something, a being that at least one of them is in every continent on the planet. And that was my way of making it inclusive,
Gotcha.
making it as inclusive as possible. Okay, it's maybe a wee bit more subtle. Okay, we don't have any like koala bears or kangaroos, but we do have snakes, we do have a lizard, we do have, like that kind of a thing to represent, like
Mm.
below the equator in the southern hemisphere. Um, and that was really important. There's other ones, for when it came to it, so it's probably this is the card that everybody's going to struggle with saying, so I will say it. It's obsequies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yes, it might look very kind of, I say, like Norse-esque, but there's loads of different cultures round about the world, past, present, who have that kind of burning ceremony
Yes.
when somebody passes. And that was the reason why I was searching for a word that, and basically obsequies means funeral rites.
Mm-hmm.
That's the definition of the word. And I
You taught
used,
me this
eh?
word. I did not know this word. I can't tell you how rare it is that I come across a word that I don't know, but this was one, and I was like, oh, that's going into the dictionary because it was so perfect. It was so perfect.
And that was the reason, it was like, yes, I want a word to mean that ceremony that we have, that every culture has, regardless of what the ceremony is, an acknowledgement of there being a ceremony to say goodbye, for the transition of someone's life, from the living to wherever you believe that the person goes. But
It's
it,
a bit of a sideways question, but do you think that we've lost that ritualized aspect of the death process in the West?
I think there's a lot of places in the West that do, and although I'm not an advocate of organised religion, I think one of the few remaining belief systems, certainly like how I grew up, that still goes through that kind of process, is probably
Yeah.
Catholic Church.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
would
it's
agree.
like it's like if somebody is of the Catholic faith, and I mean, with the greatest of respect, but they don't have string it out. Like I remember,
Mm.
like when I was little, and like a great aunt or something, would pass away. You would have like the 3 nights of the rosary where the priest would come and everybody would gather and say prayers. And me being me, I always wanted to know what happened, but I was always, because obviously I wasn't a Catholic, and plus I was a kid. I didn't know, and I was like, what do you do? And I would ask, being curious, it's like, you just say prayers, and you'd be like, and I would look at the preparations. I'd be like, but how come the good china's getting brought out? How come the good plate? And it transpired it's
But
because the priest was coming. And
mm,
that was a thing. And then you had like the last night, and then they would take like the body to the chapel, and they would spend the night. And it was very ceremonial. I think and a lot of times it's now kind of just became 15 minutes at a crematorium where a stranger stands up and says a few things about a person who meant a great deal to the people sitting in the congregation or, gathered, and that's it. And you're just kind of expected to go
Yeah.
on with your life.
I actually trained as a death doula at the beginning of the year. So, yeah. And I thought it was really interesting because there seems to me to be a schism between what is death and loss as a natural part of life, a natural part of the cycles of life, and the extent to which we are kind of divorced from it nowadays. So, in the example that you were giving there of the Catholic funeral rites and everything that goes with that, hugely ceremonial. It's almost like everybody understands what is required of them, and there's a task, there's a job for everyone, even if it's just standing there and praying. Everybody kind of knows what they're to do,
Hmm.
and that exposure over perhaps a more protracted period gives people an opportunity to really observe the end of a cycle, but also the respect and dignity that is given after death,
Hmm.
and in some way may reduce the fear that is associated with that.
Hmm.
Whereas I think when people are just kind of put in a hospice, and then the next thing that you know, it's time for a funeral. It all feels very jarring, and I do feel like we've kind of lost connection with that. And it's something that came up in the doula course that I studied at the beginning of the year. It was a constant thing that was brought up, and I think this is one of, well, yeah, my personal experiences with death, just as your personal experiences of death. It's yours was even more isolating than mine, because of what was going on in the world at the time.
Hmm.
But the dominant energy there for me was there was everybody around between death and funeral. And funeral happens, everybody's gone. Well, from your experience, it was just there was nobody there, full stop,
No.
which I can't even begin to imagine what that was like.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, it was like
kind
I
of,
couldn't even go and spend time with my mum.
yeah.
You know,
Like, it's just,
it was horrific. It's like she essentially lost the love of her life, who she was with for 47 years.
mhm.
And I mean, we were very lucky. We were very blessed because we were one of the few lucky people who were actually allowed to go to the hospital. And my mum was with my dad when he passed. Um, she had to obviously get like really, like with protection and the whatever on, but she was allowed to be there, and I did have the opportunity to go, but I chose not to, not because I didn't want to, but because in that moment I felt like it needed to just be them that said goodbye to
Mm.
each other. It would have felt too. I don't know. Even though like it was my dad, it just felt too like kind of too much a precious moment between they two. You
Can
know.
tell Venus is a dominant energy in your chart. Like, it's a Taurus Venus thing going on. It's beautiful, but
Mm.
what I see this deck doing here is kind of bringing everything back into the cycle, into the circle. If I'd had something like this at the time of my profound bereavements, I think it would have helped me order my emotions a little
Mm.
bit more than I did at the time. Um, if only for the fact that here's something that is absolutely dealing with the issue that I have in front of me. It's not idle platitudes, it's not pink
Yeah.
fluffy things, it's not patting on the head and going, oh, well, he's with his granddad now and all that kind of
Oh,
thing. It's like, I don't want to hear that.
no.
Like, in the case of my husband, it's like there's half the family that there was before now. Now it's me and two children, and I don't know how I'm supposed to function in
Mhm.
the world. And there's not very much around,
Mhm.
I find now, that deals with
No.
that on that level at
And I
all.
think I think it comes down, that fear that we talked about, that
Mm.
separation that
Yeah.
we have, between the living and death. It's like we've been brought up to, certainly again in the West, like where we don't talk about death. We don't.
No, we talk about it in euphemisms, passed on, you
Uh-huh.
know, passed over, all that
I
sort of
we
stuff.
don't say, that person's dead. You're never going to see that person again. It's all very much,
Mm.
and I mean, we're probably, because of what we do for a living, we're probably the exception to the rule. We are,
Mm.
I remember, kind of um, doing an Instagram live with somebody, and they were like, "So, what is it you do, Marion?" I'm like, "Well, I speak to dead people." And it's like, and they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "Uh-huh." And some of my work is mediumship based, but at the
Mhm.
same time, there's the stage before that. And again, that's what I
Yes.
found with like the ancestral decks, which are
Yeah.
beautiful. It was like, right, okay, oh, let's go and connect with our ancestors, and it's very much this kind of like spiritual practice again, which is wonderful. But there was nothing there to say, do you know what? Your parents died. The love of your life has died. Your child has died. Here is something that you can sit, and if you want to cry, then here's something that will help you cry. If you want to
Mm.
scream, here is something that will witness your screams. That was the inspiration behind the Fury card with the tiger.
Yeah.
And it was like,
I recognise that so hard, so hard.
and it was like, when like I was thinking about that, because I was like, I don't want to shy away from anything.
Mm.
There is cards in this deck that will make people feel uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
that's the point. That's the reason why, because there, for me, there had to be an acknowledgement of that feeling, because like, me personally, like, I remember, like, the first kind of a big loss that I had in my life, was my great aunt.
Mm.
Innocence, and then, but that was a kind of expected loss. But it's a
Yes.
grandparent or like my great aunt. It's expected. It's still really difficult and really hard, but in a
Hmm.
way, it's the natural order of things. But
Yes.
then, when I was like 24, my sister very suddenly passed away at the age of 22. It was not
Mm.
expected. It was sudden. It was traumatic. It was just, and there's a card for
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But it was like, how do you deal with that? How do you come to terms with that? I'm 24, and all of a sudden, my whole life, practically my whole life, I've had a sibling, I've had my sister. I've always had a friend. Exactly,
These cards are telling the story right here, Marion. They really
exactly,
are.
Um, and it's like all of a sudden I've known, but then the thing was as well, it was like people that I had known my whole life, and this is like older adults. This isn't even like people my own age. Like older
Mhm.
adults who I had looked up to, who I had respected, would see me in the street, and they would
Mhm.
cross the road to
I
avoid
had that
seeing me.
experience. I had that
And
experience, particularly after my daughter died. People
mhm,
just did not know what to say,
mhm.
and they decided it was probably best for them just to stay out of the way so that they didn't upset me. And I was sat desperate for anybody to say Freya's name and acknowledge that she existed, and nobody wanted to say Freya's name because, like, we don't want to upset her. And I'm like, don't act like she didn't exist. Like, it feels like gaslighting
Yes.
of
Uh-huh.
the worst kind.
It's completely, and then at the same point, it's like, I'm sitting there and I'm witness, and that was the first time in my life that I had ever seen my dad crying. And it's like little things like that, that you don't register at the time, but then like maybe years later or so you're like, oh. And then like, obviously like my dad being like a man's man and for the west coast of Scotland and emotions aren't real, and it's like we don't talk about and we don't show emotion, and to
Yeah.
to see my dad like utterly heartbroken and dissolving into tears, that was probably felt more traumatic,
Yes.
than the actual kind of my grief. It wasn't so much, it was just like, right, okay, so he's the person, there's my parents, they're in bits, how, what do I do? It's like, and it's
Yes.
really that thing, and it's like, and it's all these things people don't talk about. They don't, it's just like, and the thing with me, know me, obviously your audience don't necessarily know me, but I cope with things with dark humour, you know.
Yeah, me too.
It's a thing. Um, and I'll never forget, there was this one day I was in my local town, and this kind of older lady, and she was very polite and very nice. And bless her, I mean, she did come up to me. She wasn't one of the ones who took one look, looked like a startled deer in the headlights, and literally ran into oncoming traffic to avoid me. And she came up, she was like, Marion. I was like, oh, hi. And she was like, I'm so sorry you lost your sister. And I was like, and I just looked at her, deadpan face, prepare yourself, Carrie. And I was like, I know, I just don't know where I've left her. Which is clearly a terrible thing to say.
It's also a protective mechanism. You were deflecting the emotion of the moment. But
Absolutely.
you can see that now. You know. Mm.
And I just remember like, this poor lady's face, she was just like, well, it's nice to see you. And she went running away, you
I'm
know.
sure.
Aye. Like,
Mm.
things like that.
So,
And yes, it's very dark humour, but
did you find that in creating the deck, it actually did anything to transform your experience of your own grieving process at all?
it probably did, but it wasn't until after the creation of it
Mm.
that there was realizations. There was deep
That's what I was going to ask. Were there
realizations.
any like epiphany moments as you were kind of creating? Go, oh, wow! I didn't realize I felt that.
Yeah. One of the stranger things, right, but actually quite amusing things was, right. So, um, this card here, freedom,
Hmm.
right, which
Hmm.
which is Clive, who is the lion's called Clive.
Yeah, but on the back of the deck, he's on the back of the deck as well,
He
isn't he?
is,
Yeah, yeah.
and he will be
There.
on the front cover of the box. Proud,
Mm-hmm.
right up there. Um, and I said to Terry, again, like the instruction that I gave her a lot of the time, it was very organic.
Mm-hmm.
I would maybe have a vision of something, or I would maybe just say some words to her, and just say it. And that was the thing, and some of them as well, she was maybe painting something else, and then she would be hit with inspiration, and she would show me a painting, and then I'd be like, oh, that would be perfect for X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how we created it back and forth. It wasn't just all me saying, all right, I want this, blah, blah, blah. But what I did say to her was, could we have a lion? And that was all I said. And that's what she came back with, because she had painted lionesses before. And when I first seen Clive, or what the card as Freedom, I had dark hair, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it was actually, was it my mum or was it somebody else? I can't remember. I think it was my mum that pointed it out. But it was like, I had such a connection with this card. And my mum was like, you know, when people say that owners of dogs start to look like their dogs a bit? And I'm like, uh-huh. She's like, well, you dyed your hair that bright red, and look at that line. It's got red strands through it. And I'm like, all right, okay. And he was one of the very early cards that Terry created. And the thing that actually came to me, the kind of epiphany, if you like, which only just happened a couple of weeks ago. So I've not actually shared this with anybody before, so bear with.
All
I know you're right in there. So when it came to the the card that I wanted specifically for um, a partner passing away or a spouse passing away, I wasn't quite sure how to do it. Obviously, I knew that it'll be one with animals, and I didn't really know. And then this vision, one of my shower visions, it was, as we affectionately called it, I would be in the shower washing my hair or whatever, and I would suddenly get this vision in my head, and I would immediately jump out the shower, wrap myself in my dressing gown, run to where my phone was, and send Terry a voice note and describe exactly what I was seeing in my head. So when the vision came to me, and it was, luckily I was just out the shower when this one came to me, and I just had this, well, vision, of a lion and a lioness. And it was like, I'm like, right, the lioness is in the foreground, but like the lion walking away. So that was adieu.
What's really interesting is the second you start to explain the process, like the cards there, like I know what it is. Like I can see it in the deck, Yeah, but it's that the ability to be able to condense a feeling, an emotion, an action, a life event in a picture and in a word. Like the way that you two have synthesized this together. Well, I've been raving at you for 18 months about how incredible this is.
Yeah.
How do you envisage people actually using this?
Really, I mean, with the same energy and spirit that it was created organically. How when somebody chooses to have the deck in their life and invite it into their life, really, to, as you said, I never wanted it to be prescriptive, because
Yeah.
first of all, I find that incredibly egotistical. Like, who am I? Who am I to tell you how you should feel? It's not my thing. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I understand that there is some form of direction required
Hmm.
if necessary. Some people, because there could be some people who are just sitting there, and I don't know, maybe this deck would be bought as a gift for them, because there's maybe somebody who cares deeply for a person, and they're going through something and they don't know what to do. So they see this and they maybe think, right, maybe that'll help them. So it's like, you can sit and you can look through either the images or look at the words, the titles of the cards, and see if something resonates or something maybe triggers a memory, and then and in turn that brings out the emotions that are required to be released. And throughout this creation process, what's been deeply humbling is the amount of vulnerability that people have shared with me.
Yeah.
You know, that if I've been like different events, etc., and I've had the deck with me, you know, and they've maybe asked to see it, and everybody gets struck with a different card because everybody's got different losses. Everybody's got
I saw
different
it happen at the tarot conference. Like
outcomes.
everybody would just stop on a particular card, and it was different for everyone. But there was a number of times where we saw different people reacting to different cards, and we both knew without even having to speak to each other what kind of loss that
Yes.
person had. And they weren't always obvious, but what kind of loss was behind that.
No.
And there was just that moment where it just sort of suddenly
The death gets caught.
filled. Well, I mean, Marion, you reduce me to tears, and I don't cry. Yes, that was
But if I'm
ambushed me with it as
crying,
well.
if I'm crying, you're
You can
crying.
make
The thing.
If you can make a Capricorn ascendant cry, you must be doing something well, I reckon, because
It gets back to that kind of a old tarot reader's joke. It's like the best compliment you can give after a reading is if your client bursts into tears, then you know you've done a good job.
oh, I feel like I haven't done my job properly unless my client's crying.
That's a thing.
My God, you want a refund? Like, I'm sorry.
Why wasn't I crying? But what's going on?
Oh,
Oh, it's terrible. Dark humour. That's us.
do you feel like this deck is like a legacy of the relationship that you had with your dad and the relationship that you had with your sister? Like, is there a specific person, personal relationship that you feel it kind of speaks to specifically, or is it kind of like the cohesive whole of the effect of these relationships on you? Sorry, I kind of threw quite a lot at you there in one go, didn't I?
Well,
My
I
bad.
thanks.
No,
Uh,
no.
it it feels like uh, what I remember is when Anne had passed, the overriding thing with me and how I've really dealt with a whole manner of situations in my life is, and I don't know if it's a Taurus in me, I don't know if it's a whole Hierophant energy, but when something happens to me, part of my coping and working through process is using my experiences to help other people.
Yeah.
And that's a overriding thing and overriding like concept in my life entirely. You know, it's like people like if I like back when I was studying and like kind of using complementary therapies, like I did a course in like counselling. You know, so it was like you're basically learning how to be a counsellor, and essentially learning how to be a counsellor is learning how to listen to people and picking up not just the verbal clues but the physical clues, the facial clues, you know. And I think sometimes words are really difficult for people,
Yeah.
and I think that I don't necessarily need to speak to everybody. But if I know that something that I've created because of pain that I've experienced, and that pain can transpire into assisting somebody else, then that was really the motivation behind the deck.
It's true alchemy,
Yeah,
is what that is.
maybe it's my Sag
Which
Ascendant
was,
Temperance.
well, there it is. Which one was the most challenging the most challenging concept to convey out of all of them?
I think it was child. I think, you know, and obviously I'm not a parent, you know. Um, I think I'm an adopted big sister to many people, but that was the hardest, because it was like, and I think this was a kind of a, it's the one, and you spoke to earlier, it's the one that people will not touch. It's the subject people will not discuss it.
I'll put that one back up on the screen for people to look at. This is the card that made me cry, everyone. I saw it and it was like being punched in the stomach, but in the best possible way, because it spoke to my experience. Like, I knew exactly what was going on in that card, and nothing I have ever seen has come close to getting me there. And it was an instant reaction.
And what's
Came up from somewhere I know not where. Just ambushed me.
it comes to the depths of how my mum described it was when she seen it. It comes for the depths, the pain, the only a mother who has lost a child experiences.
Yes.
That's not to diminish a father or anybody else. It's not to diminish that person's loss, but this was how my mum described it, that it's literally like that a part of you dies, because essentially it is a part of you. Because you've carried that human for 9 months, and it has been dependent in you, and it's been a physical part of you. So that was how she described it. Very poetic for a Scorpio, I felt.
I think it's like a subversion of the natural order, because parents are not supposed to outlive their children.
Exactly.
There's something so fundamentally wrong about that, and there isn't really a place to make that better
No.
in your heart. You're right. It's a part of you, and it's not there anymore. You outlived it.
And
It's wrong.
it goes, as you say, it goes against the natural order of nature.
Yeah.
And I just, like how do I, try to, kind of put that into, as you say, like a concept, and that's how the title was just very simple, just child. And what I've noticed is people who see this card, if they have experienced it, they see it right away. Right away. Like you right away. But people who have not experienced it, they will look at it and be like, oh, look at the wee baby bears. And they will see the beauty of
Hold
the
it up.
actual painting. But people who have experienced it, they see it right away. And that's a testament to Terry.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind. I mean, Terry painted this when she was expecting her first child. I mean,
That's
you know,
strong.
yes.
That's a strong character.
And I mean, she
And
did. She
the
had.
duality of Gemini, perhaps, right there. Like, to be painting about death while pregnant, like, like, whew.
I mean, I really did. I mean, that was the thing. And I said to her right at the beginning, I goes, look, this is not going to be easy
Yeah.
for any of the two of you. I goes, if at any time this gets too much and you want out, then say. I was very much like that. I was like, I'm not no inflicting this, but forcing somebody to feel like as if they had to do this, because it could be deeply traumatic. It could be a deeply traumatic experience for somebody. To be in that mindset. But the job that she's done is just incredible. And as I
No,
say,
she's
it
an
was
exceptional artist.
was.
Is there a particular card that you're most proud of?
Yes, there is. And it kind of connects to another one that I'm really really proud of. And it was for somebody else that I did the second one for. So I'll talk about the first one. So this one is Departure. And the story behind this was, so it was really important. I mean, all of them were really important to me. Every concept that, every acknowledgement was really important, but there was some that stood out more so. And it was something that, didn't necessarily get talked about. And again, having that fine line between creating something that served the purpose that I wanted it to serve in a kind of personal note, but also it being open enough that people could put their own meaning on it. They could find their own stories within the images or within the title. And that was the number one thing, and I think that was probably the hardest thing, to be honest. But this card here was, it's a homage, if you like, to service personnel who have perished in wars.
Wow.
And the reason that I did that is because I lost a good friend to a conflict. And second of all, there was just something, and there was somebody who was very important in my life who was in the services for a long time, and they lost people, and it had a profound effect on their life. And how this one came about was because I was like, I don't want it to be like an open field with like a lone poppy or something, I needed it to be more abstract than that.
Yeah.
And how it came about was I was on the last train home from London to Glasgow, and it had been delayed, so it was even later. And I got off at Glasgow Central, and me being me with my gammy hip and my gammy back, I very soon became the last person walking along the platform. And it is extremely long. It is, and it felt like, I had went up and down to London in the one day. I sometimes do crazy things like that. So I'd been awake for practically 24 hours at this point, and I was, yeah. I was like, what day is it? What year is it? And I was walking along, and all the like day-to-day trains were all parked up for the night, and it was really eerie, so quiet. And then I was like, and I could hear like all this noise, like as if the train station was really busy. And I'm like, what's going on? And then I could smell the steam. I could smell smoke. I'm like as if there was a coal fire. And I'm like, what is this? And then I felt as if I was surrounded by hundreds of people. And I was like,
Little
what?
time slip.
And I was like, what's going on? But I just kept walking because I could see a guy in like a turquoise and black jacket. He was like the ticket guy or whatever. I was like, I'll just keep focusing on that guy, and I'll keep walking. And then, but I just kept feeling these, and then I kept feeling the pain. The pain, the anguish, Carrie. Unbelievable. And I then looked up to, it was like as if like somebody turned my face and like got me to look up, and there was a war memorial. And it was a war memorial for the service personnel who left to go to war in the First
From
and
that
Second World Wars from that station. So I'm getting
Yeah.
for that station, and for the ones who never come back. And it was the pain of whether it was like sweethearts, like newlyweds, or those who never got to marry, or mothers saying goodbye to probably sons, you know,
Yeah.
and it just all crashed in me,
Mm.
and I suddenly realised that's that's it, you know. And I was very like, and I told basically I would tell Terry these stories, and
Hmm.
I'm like, do with that what you will. And what I said, you know, like the few people that are in the deck, they're very nondescript. You know,
Mm.
it's like there's a kind of a suggestion that there's people there, but there's nothing to distinguish like race or gender or, you know, you don't know, you just know that there's a suggestion of a person, and again that was very deliberate. But
Yeah.
that's the story behind that card. But it can be for anything, you know. It can be like I was speaking to like Cashel Matthews, and she seen that card, and that was one of the ones that she kind of stopped at, and
Yeah.
she said that that was like a visual representation of how she describes moving on in
Yeah.
her shamanic journey and like classes, and
Hmm.
how she's described it for like 30 odd years. You know, so and then that, and it was like my kind of a thing to say, you know what, you're remembered, you know, because it's like views, what's right, what's wrong, you know what I mean? The fact is, people died, you
Yeah.
know, and that was what I wanted to acknowledge. I wanted to acknowledge the loss, whether people agree with it,
Yes.
whether people disagree with it, you know, the fact that there was people who lost, there was people who, it's a horrible, ugly thing, you know, but again, it should be acknowledged. So that was that, and then that led on to, or this is a card that's connected to it, because this one is about secret grief, and
Mm.
this was initially like when you're grieving for something or someone that you can't, that society doesn't give you permission to grieve for. You
Yeah.
know, so whether it's like, you know, there was a client that I had as well, and they were part of a relationship, and the other individual was married, and essentially their partner died, but she couldn't grieve openly.
Not outwardly. Yeah.
You know, she couldn't grieve openly, she couldn't talk to anybody about it. The people who
Mm.
did know about the relationship, because like this was 15 years of this person's life,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm no, like, you know, we're no the morality police, you know, we're no here to judge. You know,
No.
that person came to me, and I was the first person that they were openly able to speak to. You know, and that's
So different.
a really, again, humbling thing. You know,
Yes.
the experiences that we have. Um, but then like this has became like so much more as well, because other people like see it, and it's almost like a really good friend of mine said, in creating that card, it's as if you've given me permission.
That's what I was just about to say. It's like you've allowed people to give themselves permission to start the grieving process, because we know where it goes when it isn't gone through as a process. It ends in that very stagnant energy of the Five of Cups, and it's
That festering thing that we carry around with us.
exactly so. Marion, thank you so much for coming and talking with us this evening. And thank you so much for giving me an advance copy of it. Why don't you?
This this is not going to be the final version. This, the
Mm,
actual deck is going to be like proper Oracle card size, and basically,
okay.
I messed up the sizes.
It's okay. It's a prototype deck, so
It's
it's
a
fine, right?
prototype. I
Right.
messed up. So if you can think of like a standard Oracle size card, I'm trying to
Trying to
think if I
think.
got any. Um,
Is the Crow Tarot about that size?
yeah, around that size, and it'll be
So,
in yeah.
yeah.
And actually, just today, we have met the stretch goal on Kickstarter for the pretty edges. So
Oh,
there will be matte edges.
lovely. Like that's a very elegant touch.
Yes.
Why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and where they can find the Kickstarter
Okay. So if you
campaign?
go on get the campaign, if it's
Mhm.
all right with you, I will send you the link and you can maybe put it in
Absolutely.
the description box.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In the description box. Yeah.
Yes. It is. You just go into Kickstarter and you search the Grief Journey Oracle, and it should come up. You will see a picture
Mhm.
of Clive and the unicorn. How weird that Clive has got a name and no other one has got a name.
Well, as a Leo, I think it's proper that the lion should have a name. Just saying.
You can
And
find me here on YouTube, Marion Kitaro. Come see me. We have fun. I'm no serious like Carrie. I'm fun.
I'm not serious. I'm a
No,
remarkably silly human being.
we don't go quite as deep. Neither we do. We get some messages, but we have some fun. Um,
Mhm.
and then like, on Instagram, everywhere I'm basically Marion K Taro, and
Mhm.
you can find me wherever you like. We can,
Perfect. Thank you, Marion, and
thank you.
thank you everyone for watching. You take care now.